I have met some UFO researchers. I know, I don't know if that's the current favorite terminology, but that's what I'll use just for our discussion. But certainly in my experience in counseling STE experiencers and talking with STE experiencers, that there are many people who at some point in their spiritual awakening journey are having what we label as UFO encounters, but they're experiencing them, the majority of them are experiencing them as transdimensional and psychic experiences. It's like the beings communicate with them through telepathy, which is a psychic experience, which is a type of STE. If we're having telepathic communication with an entity or being, let's just call it a being, that is not on our three-dimensional, that's an STE. If we're having telepathic communication with a being that is on our dimension, that's also an STE. So there's a definitely a component. Now there seems to be increasing evidence that some UFO encounters are actually physical on our physical plane, like pilots flying by have seen them and taken video cameras. But there also is evidence, even though they might be here, that they travel transdimensionally. And then there are others that seem to be transdimensional the whole time, as all the time, interpenetrating with our reality. So it's not my specialty, but what I have observed is that people who have an STE of one type, so let's say it's a telepathy one, that would, how we talked about opening the chakras and opening the brain centers, that would tend to open that brain center. That's the telepathy brain center. And that telepathy brain center would tend to stay open. And something that I found in my research is that people who've had one type of STE will very likely continue to have that type of STE. It's like that capacity has opened for them in their consciousness. But it seems to be contagious, that it might spread to other types of STEs. So they might start noticing they're getting more clairvoyance. They might notice they're getting more clairaudience. It's also a possibility, although we don't know this and much more research will be needed, it's also a possibility that some of these encounters with some of these beings, because from my understanding, there are many types of beings with various levels of development that may make contact, that say they're highly spiritually involved ones that are making the contact, that actually that contact might stimulate the Kundalini. So in addition to stimulating that capacity in their consciousness, it might awaken the Kundalini. And I have a third thing to say, which is it's also my observation that people who've already had a spiritual awakening, who've already had a Kundalini awakening, who are already open to, say, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, it's like my impression is that they're more receptive or more open to a transdimensional experience because these capacities are already open in their consciousness. So, there are many layers to this understanding, but that's my current point of view.
Thank you. Just to share a small anecdote of some information I've heard from different relevant podcasts in the last 6 months to a year from people who are quite involved in this topic and who are part of that disclosure that's happening in America at the moment. Yes. The first thing is that many people, be it military or government officials, are indicating that their research shows that it is transdimensional and it's linked to consciousness. The experiences are specifically linked to our to the nature of reality and how we experience consciousness. And they don't call it the language that was used in the Senate and Congress recently in the was non-human intelligence rather than alien, because they wanted to specify they cannot prove it's from another part of the universe. It could be transdimensional, so they just used non-human intelligence. But also there are a couple of books I've read recently, and they both the lady called Professor or Dr. Diane Pascaller, who's a professor of religious studies at a university in America, and she looks at the link between abductions, but also people experience angels and fairies historically, and she saw links between Catholic religious experiences like Saint Teresa of Avila, Marian apparitions, and then abductions, and how abductions are just a modern day phenomenon of something that's happened over many, many years. And if you think about Saint Teresa of Avila or these Catholic spiritual experiences, and they are the spiritual awakening experiences. And so what she's suggesting is that there's just a anthropological visual experience of entities, and the modern day phenomena could be a UFO, but back 2000 years it would be an angel. So
yes, very much what people would label it, that you're talking about what people label it. And I very much in my book, that's why I try to describe what's the essence of the experience, and then people may label it differently, how I would label it.
Right. But there's a phenomenon. The phenomenon is happening. People are having real life changes from it. And as you wrote quite succinctly, it's not that dissimilar from people are having Kundalini awakenings. That it's just a phenomenon and a mystical experience. How we perceive it, whether it's an external visual of an alien or whether it's an internal vision of light and mandalas, which is what I had. Maybe at some level there's no difference. Maybe it's just an experience.
And that's why I like STE as an umbrella term, and these are included. All these experiences are included under STEs, and also forgot the second point that I was going to say. I apologize, but yeah, so it's included under STEs, and and there are many different levels that we can perceive. So we can have a vision on if you look at the astral planes, we talked about that before, all the levels on the astral planes. Maybe I didn't give them detail. I compare it to the ocean, how we now understand the ocean. There's the levels at the top that's full of light, and levels in between that there's less light, and levels way down at the bottom where light never comes, and all sorts of different forms of life has adjusted to living in the different levels in the ocean. The ones down at the bottom where there's no light and no oxygen, ones in between, and ones up at the top that need the light. That similarly in the astral planes, how I've come to understand it, there are many, 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 many different astral planes, levels in the astral planes, and that there are levels of evolution of consciousness on the different astral planes. According to Yogananda and Paramahansa Yogananda, and also to yogic and Buddhist traditions, but we continue to evolve even higher than what we perceive as the astral heavens. That when we have finished learning all of our lessons we need to learn in our physical incarnations, that we then start reincarnating in astral incarnations, because there are even higher levels of learning that our souls are going through in our astral incarnations, where we no longer need a body to learn and grow in those dimensions. And then supposedly, this is way beyond our understanding, but that there's also on the causal plane, when we no longer need even the energy visual, that we go to the plane of pure consciousness, that we incarnate repeatedly on the causal plane until finally, the ultimate union with the source is achieved. So I'm saying all of that to give a perspective when we're having these transdimensional experiences. These transdimensional beings, in terms of their soul evolution, they certainly seem to be technologically more advanced than us, and they're able to do, this transdimensional thing that we're not yet able to do. But that we don't know what level, if we look at this hierarchy of astral planes, that they're coming from. The spiritually advanced. That some people automatically assume, because they're technologically more advanced, that they're spiritually more advanced, but that's not necessarily the case. That just like we know, just because everyone's in a physical body here on earth doesn't mean that they have the same spiritual understanding, that they're at the same stage of their growth. So mystical experiences, we're accessing, the high astral heavens. So I do differentiate a mystical experience where we're having, say, mystical visions with a great spiritual adept, for example, Jesus Christ, people who've had profound experiences with Jesus. It's clearly a mystical experience, life-changing. People having transdimensional experiences with non-human, what do you call it, non-human entities?
Non-human intelligence.
Okay, thank you. Non-human intelligences. From what I've heard, there's a variety on the planes that they may be living at in terms of their spiritual evolution. Some seem to be quite spiritually evolved and really want to help the planet. Others, that's not the impression I'm getting. But I differentiate that from mystical experiences where we're having a glimpse and having our souls profoundly elevated and jumped forward in our spiritual evolution by a glimpse of spiritual adepts and masters.